Welcome everybody to the discussion session for Module 4, and in this one we're going to focus on that material in Chapter 7 on which transactions are included in the GDP and then the difference between GDP and GNP, because these are the kind of most commonly missed questions on the quizzes and exams in past classes. So we're going to kind of revisit them, make sure everybody's on board with how to answer those particular types of questions. So remember that we talked about the definition for gross domestic product in our Chapter 7 lecture video, the first one for that particular chapter. And remember, it is the market value of all the final goods and services produced within a country during a specific period. If you're measuring that GDP annually, then that period is the year. So again, we're going to break down that definition. When you talk about market value, remember we're converting everything into a common denominator, which is the currency of the country. So in the United States, that would be the US dollar. We're talking about final goods and services. Remember that we don't include those intermediate goods or services, which are those that are used to produce something else. Rather, just the final goods and services, which are those that are consumed by the ultimate user. Remember, only things that are produced are included into gross domestic product. Remember, any kind of transfer is not. It has to be produced within the geographic borders of a country to be included in the GDP. Remember, it doesn't matter the citizenship or nationality of the person doing the production. If it's happening within the physical borders of the country, then it's going to be added to GDP no matter who's producing it. If it happens outside the borders of the country, it won't be added to GDP of that country, again, no matter who's producing it. And then during a specific period or a time frame that GDP is being measured, again, it can be measured quarterly, but usually in this class we'll refer to GDP as being measured annually. So it has to be produced during the year in which it is measured in order for it to be added to that year's GDP. Things that are produced in a previous year and then resold during that year won't be added to GDP unless, again, there's some addition, production, or service being provided involved with that particular sale. So let's go through a few examples and make sure we understand how this one works. So this first question just says that Fruitopia produced 10 lemons and 5 oranges last year. Lemons sold for $1 each and oranges sold for $2 each. Which of the following are true? So if you remember in class, we have to convert these things into dollar amounts. So as a nation, Fruitopia produced 10 lemons and 5 oranges. And again, we know that the lemons sold for $1 each. And we know that the oranges sold for $2 each. So 10 lemons times $1 each comes out to $10. 5 oranges times $2 each also comes out to $10. So the total GDP for Fruitopia in this particular example would be $20. So when A says the total GDP for Fruitopia last year was $20, that answer is correct. However, if we take a look at B, it says 1 orange contributes more to GDP than 1 lemon because it is worth more in the marketplace. That is also true. So 1 orange adds $2 to GDP, 1 lemon only adds $1 to GDP. So 1 orange adds more than 1 lemon to our gross domestic product. Now C says that 1 lemon contributes as much to GDP as 1 orange since they are both fruits and are both used for the same purpose. Right, remember that is not true, as we just discussed in B. Oranges add more to GDP than lemons. So because A and B are true, D is the answer you are looking for. It says both A and B are true, but C is not true. So if you were to get this question on a quiz or exam, D is the correct answer, or the one that would yield you the points. So that's what we mean by market value, converting it into a dollar amount. Let's take a look at number 2. It says that Fruitopia produced 10 lemons and 5 oranges last year, just like at the beginning of our last question. It said lemons sold for $1 each and oranges sold for $2 each. However, last year, 5 of those lemons were used to make glasses of lemonade, which then sold for $3 each. What was the total GDP for Fruitopia last year? So again, we have 5 oranges that are being sold at a price of $2 each. So that part hasn't changed, and that's going to add $10 to our GDP. Now we have 10 lemons being produced, but remember 5 of them were used to make lemonade. So we only have 5 lemons that are being sold and consumed as lemons by the ultimate user. And again, they are sold at a price of $1 each. So that's going to add $5 to that GDP. And then the other 5 lemons were then used to make lemonade. So we can't include those as a final good or service because they're being used as intermediate goods to produce a different good, and that is that lemonade that's being sold at $3 each for a total of $15. Right, so if you add up the oranges, the lemons, and the lemonade, you get a total of 30. Now, again, a lot of people might be tempted to say, well, you got 10 lemons, 5 oranges, and 5 glasses of lemonade. The 10 lemons times $1 each is $10. The 5 oranges times $2 each is $10. And then the 5 lemonade times $3 each is $15. And so that should add up to 35. But then again, you'd be double counting those 5 lemons that you used as lemonade. If you're going to use those lemons as lemonade, it now becomes an intermediate good or service and therefore will not be added to GDP. Again, because the value of those intermediate goods are already capitalized into the final selling price of those final goods and services. Right? So again, B is the answer you're looking for on that one. Moving forward, remember that GDP only counts those goods and services that are produced in the period in which we are measuring. So which of these following transactions would be included into US GDP? Is it A, $600 welfare check that your neighbor received last week? Remember, welfare is money that is taken from a group of people above a certain income level and transferred to a group of people below a certain income level. Nothing is necessarily produced to get that welfare check, so that doesn't count as production and therefore would not be added to GDP. The $2,000 worth of United Airlines stock that you bought shortly after their stock dropped due to a viral video of a customer being assaulted. I think we all remember that period. I think that happened just a couple years ago. That is a financial transaction, and unless I tell you that there is a sales commission on that particular exchange, then that will also not be added to GDP. You're not producing anything. You're just trading dollars for stock, but nothing's being produced or created. Right? Now, if there was a broker who gained, say, a $10 sales commission on that exchange, then only the $10 would be included into this year's GDP. Again, the value of the stock itself would not. The $50 you lost playing cards with your friends last Saturday night, again, that's not necessarily good or service being performed, and it's certainly something that you probably wouldn't record anywhere on your tax returns. So that is not something that would be included into US GDP either. But the paycheck received by US Army captain for active service this past month, that is a service that is being paid for and performed. So therefore, this would be included into US GDP. So D is the answer you're looking for on that one. Right. So again, it's a service that has to be being performed in this particular year or period being measured. Moving on, remember what we mean by within a country. It has to happen within the geographic borders of a country to be included into GDP. So let's take a look at these answer choices when asking which of the following transactions will be added to US GDP. Toyota, a Japanese car company that locates a factory in California and staffs it entirely with employees who are Japanese citizens. Just because the owners and employees are Japanese doesn't mean that this won't add to GDP. It's happening in California, which is a U.S. state. Therefore, it is definitely happening within the geographic borders of the United States, meaning that it will add to GDP. However, if it's staffed entirely by Japanese citizens, then it might not necessarily add to U.S. GNP, something we'll talk about a little bit later. Nike, a U.S. factory that locates a factory in Indonesia and staffs it entirely with employees who are U.S. citizens. Again, because the employees and owners are U.S. citizens, that would add to GNP, or gross national product. But because the production is happening outside the geographic borders of the United States, it will not add to GDP, or gross domestic product. Your neighbor here in California buying a car produced in Germany would add to Germany's GDP, not the United States. Remember, imports do not add to GDP, they subtract from it. So that would not be an answer that you'd be looking for if you were to take this or see this question on a quiz or exam. And then finally, you spending $1,000 while on spring break in Mexico is not going to add to GDP either, right? Again, because this is happening outside the geographic borders of the United States. So again, A is the answer you're looking for there. So moving on to the fifth and final part of the definition, it's the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a specific period. So with that in mind, that specific period means that only the things being produced during the time period being measured will be added to that period's GDP. So which of these following transactions would increase this year's GDP? If you paid $500 bill to repair the transmission of your car, no matter how old that car is, that transmission repair is a service being performed this year, so that would definitely be included into this year's GDP. Buying an old television you purchased at a garage sale would not, because that old television was produced in a previous period, so that would not be added to this year's GDP, even if it was resold this year. Buying an old house built 10 years ago would not be added to this GDP unless there is a real estate commission on the exchange. But here I told you to assume no real estate commission, right? If there was a real estate commission, then only the value of that real estate commission as a service performed this year would be added to GDP. But if there's no real estate commission on the exchange, then you wouldn't add this to this year's GDP, right? When that house was built 10 years ago, the value of that house was added to that year's GDP. Again, only if you do something to the house this year to improve it will the value of that increased improvement or production would be added to this year's GDP. And by the way, don't assume that there's a real estate commission on the exchange unless I tell you there is. If I don't tell you there is, then there isn't. Also, if I say assume there isn't, then of course there isn't. And then D says the value received from selling your old car to a used car dealer. Again, assuming that your old car was not being produced this year, then it would not be added to this year's GDP because it was added to the GDP of the year in which it was produced some year prior. All right, so again, A would be the answer you're looking for on that one. All right, so moving forward, talk a little bit about gross national product. Gross national product is the total market value of all final goods and services produced by the citizens of a country, no matter where they are, right? So again, it counts the income that Americans earn abroad. So as long as you are a U.S. citizen, any of your productive activities will be added to U.S. GNP. However, it will only be added to U.S. GDP if it's happening within the geographic borders of the United States. Gross national product also ignores the income that foreigners earn in the United States. So again, it doesn't matter that the production is happening in the United States if it's happening by somebody who is a citizen of a different country. It will not add to US GNP, right? If it is happening within the United States, however, it will add to US GDP, right? So again, an American citizen working in the United States or within the geographic borders of the United States would add to both U.S. GDP and U.S. GNP. An American citizen working abroad would add to U.S. GNP only. It wouldn't add to U.S. GDP. And then a foreign citizen working in the borders of the United States would add to U.S. GDP, but it would not add to United States GNP. So make sure you understand how that works when you're trying to figure out which transactions would add to gross national product versus gross domestic product. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this question. It says a steel mill opens in Pennsylvania, which is located within the United States, and its owner, all the workers, and all the raw materials are from Canada. How would the purchase of steel from this plant change U.S. GDP and GNP? Well, since the owner and all the workers and raw materials are from Canada, right, the production here would increase Canada's GNP. However, would not affect Canada's GDP because it is happening within the geographic borders of the United States. Right, as far as U.S. GDP is concerned, because it is happening within the borders of the U.S., it would increase U.S. GDP. However, all the owners and workers are Canadian citizens, so it would leave U.S. GNP unchanged. So C is the answer you are looking for on that one. Again, this would increase Canada's gross national product and the United States' gross domestic product. All right, so that is it. Go ahead and try this on your own if you feel comfortable with the information in this video by completing the discussion session assignment on iLearn for Module 4. It's going to contain 5 multiple choice practice questions, kind of similar to some of the questions we just went over. As always, just let me know if you have any questions. You can shoot me that email or come visit me during those Zoom office hours if you need any more clarification on this particular topic. But hopefully after the lecture videos and this discussion session video, you're going to be able to pick out which activities or transactions are going to affect GDP and GNP. That's it for now. Again, let me know if you need anything, and take care.